The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
All right, here we are on the DeMott experience, and this is, wait a minute, I do this all the time. It's hashtag BDE. I'm going to start doing the BDE here on the Realm Network. That's for Mark Ronick. I always do the Realm Network. And it's going to be a different kind of podcast today, because I'm going to reach out. I had a conversation with a guy I met from over the pond, if you will. So I'm going to bring in now, and this podcast is going to turn into an interview on me. So let me introduce everybody to Dan Higgins from the UK. Dan, how you doing?
I'm good, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So this is going to be really cool. For the first time on the BDE, I'm going to get interviewed. So take it away. I'm all yours.
Cool. Right. So I'll explain a little bit. So we're currently running a project called The World According to Wrestling. I'm a journalist in the UK. I normally write about films and movies and review them and write articles about them. But I've noticed similarities between the film world and kind of soap operas and things like that. Right. And wrestling and characters and storylines in wrestling and how they're presented to audiences. So in a similar way to how people might look at a Disney princess and say, what does this teach young women in society?
Right.
We're looking at characters and storylines in wrestling, and it's basically a series of chats with people who are involved in wrestling and people who are huge wrestling mega fans. So so far we've spoken to Max Landis, and that one is launching next week. He was the writer of the film Chronicle.
Oh,
and
okay.
American Ultra, and he's written Victor Frankenstein, loads of films out this year. His dad's John Landis, who directed Thriller, the Michael Jackson music. Yeah. And so he's a wrestling mega fan, and he's very opinionated. So we're launching with him. We've also spoke to JTG out of Crime Time. We spoke to Jeff Jarrett coming up as well about the Global Force Wrestling launching and his views on the same topics, and a couple of British wrestlers as well. So Klondike Kate is coming up soon. I don't know if you heard of Klondike Kate.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, a very famous women's wrestler in British wrestling who retired.
Yes.
Years ago. So we're going down to Weymouth to speak to her in not too distant future, and a couple of other different stories of wrestling. So we spoke to someone called Erin Angel, who has been doing the independent scene in Britain many years. She's had about 3 tryouts for WWE, came close really once, and it was quite an interesting story from her perspective of trying to break through the British scene into the few opportunities that come up for British wrestlers to try and take that next step.
Right. That's very cool. Very cool.
So that's what we're doing. We're launching next week, and I thought you'd be, given your experience in the development of wrestling and as a wrestler itself, crossing the different kind of eras of wrestling, it would make for a really interesting chat.
Well, cool. I appreciate it. I'll do my best to try to follow your guests from before. The first thing I have to say, I think a lot of guys who say it, right, I'll give you my opinion, because after all, that's what wrestling is. It's just an opinion. So I look forward to it. So yeah, that's way cool. John Landis. I feel like if they do Thriller again, I'll be on it.
Yeah. And so how's the Bill DeMott experience going? How's the podcast going? How are your current projects?
I tell you, I really enjoyed the podcast. It's something new for me. The beauty of it is I get to work out of my house. And whenever I have some downtime or something, I can do a podcast. So I like the podcast, and I've met some really cool people along the way. And then naturally I have my Face Value podcast, where I get to cut up with my daughter a little bit and just talk about current events. And then we do the Bill DeMott experience on the YouTube channel, and that lets me get out there. And I always say it like this: for 28 years in sports entertainment, everybody has seen one side of Bill DeMott. And the majority of that has been Bill DeMott, the trainer, or Bill DeMott, the heel or the bad guy. And it shows a different side to me, and it lets me get out there and meet some interesting people. So I'm very happy with the way it's going. I look forward to some big things coming. I hope, you always knock wood, but I'm enjoying it, and it's something new to me. So I go into it like that, but I'm having a lot of fun.
And obviously, it must be really exciting to see how well NXT is doing, given you are such a big part of that kind of development. And the Performance Center was pretty much the Performance Center with your face all over it when it first came through. So how does it feel seeing the audience like really take to the stars of NXT and their development on the main rosters?
I think, and I've said this before, it's an honor to have been involved in the beginning stages of it. I had a part, and for everybody on iTunes who's listening to this, I have my fingers up with little space in between them. I had a small part, I feel like, in the Performance Center in NXT, but I've always said I'm happy and so proud to see where it's going. I mean, they're going to be touring the UK coming up in the near future, and they're just going crazy. And from Paul, Triple H, and everybody involved up and down the line, all the coaches, the support they have, and the work ethic is crazy. So anything with NXT, I keep my, like I always say, I keep my ear to the wall, and I listen, and I watch as much as I can, and and watching them grow to the main roster and seeing what the girls are doing. It's just been awesome, and I couldn't be prouder of how it's worked out.
And as you say, like it's super huge over here. Like as soon as tickets went on sale, they were sold out within minutes. Like it was literally that fast. Like the London Wembley show, the NXT Takeover, gone in seconds. Like, and
it's unbelievable to you take someone like Bayley, who comes from the California circuit and worked so hard to get an opportunity, and then came to the WWE, and then NXT came out, and now Bayley and Sasha and Charlotte and Becky and Tyler Breeze and Neville, they're all touring the world as their NXT personas, who have now become main roster characters. And it's just awesome to watch. And that's got to light a spark. I'd imagine that everybody who's at the Performance Center now, or anyone who has a notion of wanting to join the Performance Center, that's got to be incentive, because it's all happening from there. It's all happening from NXT. And
that's interesting, because Bayley and the Performance Center are a big central part of that new show they're doing, Breaking Ground. Have you seen any of that show?
I've caught the trailers of it. I haven't seen a full episode yet, but I see the reviews, and I feel like I kind of lived some of that. So I don't know if there's part of me that doesn't watch it for that reason, but I know the storyline and where it's going, and I think it's a great show. It's good insight to what's going on.
Sure, and I was interested to see whether it was an accurate portrayal, or whether it was there was some structured television kind of reality going on as well. But in terms of like, how has NXT, do you think, changed the landscape of wrestling in general? Because previously you had a lot more talk about TNA and Ring of Honor and other brands, but since NXT's come through, it's just kind of everybody's talking about NXT and everybody wants to be in NXT. So how has it changed kind of the independent scene? How has it changed the wrestling landscape in America?
I think it goes back to when a couple years back, when the Rollins and the Ambrose and the Sami Zayns, and then Pac came over and became Adrian Neville, and guys of that caliber who were touring the world independently and making a name for themselves in other divisions and other companies, and doing well for themselves. When they came, I think that justified what the developmental system had then become. You have, for years, the developmental system was where you had guys and a few girls where you brought them in and saw what could happen in a couple of years. And if they had something to offer, great. And if not, everybody moved on. Well, now you're bringing in the Samoa Joes and the Sami Zayns and the Adrian Nevilles and Rollins and Ambrose, who were already established, Kevin Owens, up and down the line. So I think that the guys and the cats from the Ring of Honors and from around the world are going, okay, let me keep going where I'm at and get better so I can join NXT. I think it's another stepping stone, because for years, as a kid, speaking for myself, and I got to travel the world and be in WCW and the beginning of ECW, and then join the WWF at the time, which turned into the WWE. But everybody who dreams of being that wrestler wants to feel that WWE experience. And that's just my opinion, but everybody wants it. And now they know that NXT and WWE are almost one and the same.
And how does it differ when, like, you're training someone who's quite young or from scratch almost, and then you have people on the other side of the coin like Kevin Owens and Finn Balor who were there during your time as well, I think.
Right.
And they come in and they're almost at the top of their game. How does that performance center, or how did you train them in? How does your training style differ between those different kind of levels?
Well, speaking, and again, just speaking for myself, not for anyone else, you have to know your talent and where they're at. So you take someone who's new and who's never done it. The beauty of the Performance Center is there's so many skilled coaches that are there for so many different steps of the training, that you take a Finn Balor who's clearly made a name for himself, knows what he's doing, who's ready to go, maybe put a couple extra pounds on him, change some things up as far as presentation into sports entertainment, which, by the way, is phenomenal. But all that stuff happened at the Performance Center. But I think you have to know your talent, where they're at. And then the hard part as a coach in any sport is helping the talent understand that it's not an insult to be said, you're not ready for that. And then knowing your key players and saying, yeah, you're really good. Let's get better at this. And that's anything from cutting your promo to your presentation, to your ring gear, to your workouts. And everybody who's seen the Performance Center, it's all right there. It's all in front of them.
And with people like Kevin Owens and Finn Balor, and for people who have come through that NXT system, seem to have really well-rounded, good characters, and also like they feel, like Max Landis was saying, they feel really modern. Those characters, like Kevin Owens particularly, feels a really modern character that you may not have seen before ever. And it's just like, what role do you have or did you have within the building of those characters and the development of those characters?
I'm always of the opinion, and I learned it from Dusty Rhodes years ago, and you learn it from being in those meetings and listening to guys like Michael Hayes and Pat Patterson. And there has to be something of you in your character in order for it to come across that way. And it's just a Kevin Owens dialed up, who is a tremendous person and knows how to dial it up. I think that's the difference. And Ambrose, to me, is the same way. When that red light is on, you have to know. You can be taught certain things and you can be given certain tools, but when that red light comes on, you know the naturals, and you know the guys and the girls that get it, and they just have that thing about them.
So how is it different then from when you were starting out? So you had a range of characters. You had ECW. You were Crash the Terminator, was it? You had Hugh Morris, who's actually, can I say, when I was growing up, my favorite two wrestlers were Hugh Morris and Just Incredible. Purely because of the names. So it's just like, it was the name that had won me over as a young wrestling fan, because I just found it hilarious. Like, it was before I got into kind of like The Rock or anything like that. It was like Hugh Morris and Just Incredible purely on the names. However, and then you had Huge Erection. So like, I'm interested in when you came up with those gimmicks, how did you come up with them to start with? And is the process different from how like Finn Balor's gimmick would be come up with, or Kevin Owens' gimmick, or how it works in the Performance Center now?
Well, for me, I didn't come up with anything. I went into wrestling as Bill. I became Crash the Terminator off a European tour, and Animal from the Road Warriors wasn't available, and the promoter apparently had promised a Road Warrior. So when I got there, they shaved my head into a mohawk and they painted my face, and I was in the long black tights. And in the early parts of my career, I was I'm a big burly guy, and I had one tattoo on my arm, so I had a resemblance of Animal. So you give this big round guy with a mohawk and face paint, and so they named me Crash. So I couldn't be Hawk or Animal, so Crash came into it. And that came from Eddie Mansfield, of all people, the name. I became Crash the Terminator, and I started getting booked that way. So we ran with that, and I did the face paint and the the big nasty guy thing, and I brought that all the way through Japan. And when I joined WCW, my original name was the Man of Question, simply because they didn't know what to do with me.
Oh, and that's what created that gimmick.
Yeah, the Man of Question, because Kevin Sullivan wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He just wanted me with the company. So they took my tights and they sewed question marks over them. Mm. And then my first promo I ever did at the CNN Center was with Terry Taylor, and I laughed. And I think, and I always tell the story that I believe it was Terry Taylor's wife at the time who said he's very humorous. So they named me Humorous, except Tony Schiavone called me Hugh Morris. And then, I ran with that for pretty much my 6-7 years in WCW, except for the huge erection, time, which was a Vince Russo configuration that we laugh about till this day. And then, but it all comes back to, and fast forward to WWE, it's got to be something of who you are. So when Tough Enough and all those things came, they said, get rid of the Hugh Morris. We want Bill DeMott. And all those characters are an extension of who I am.
And so you've mentioned Vince Russo and other people there in terms of your character development. Is it now people in the same level of influence who guides people like Kevin Owens, Tyler Breeze, like the people coming up from NXT, or is it writers in a room, or is it changed at all, or is there's similarities?
Well, I believe when I can speak from when I was there was so much more empowerment now to the talent of what do you see yourself as, and if you see yourself as X, Y, or Z, present X, Y, and Z the best way you know how, and then you get the powers that be in these great minds who say, wow, maybe a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of that. But the talent has the say in their names. They pick their names, and 90% of the time they're pretty good, and then you get a couple ones that are rubbish, and you have to rename them. But the talent is very empowered to have say in who they are and what they want to do. So like, and Finn Balor, I think it was from two mythological characters. And while people may have went, nah, I don't see it, that's what he felt. And he felt it, and they're empowered to run with it. And, that's how they get their names. Kevin Owens was Kevin Steen. Owens, his son. It meant something to him. And the talents, Charlotte, Ashley Flair.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. And talking of Charlotte then, how do you feel, how has the presentation of women changed over time since you've been involved in wrestling? So, like, obviously there is different kind of eras of wrestling, which right. you would have things that now I couldn't ever foresee seeing a bra and panties match again. Or something that was very 90s of that era. Do you see what I mean? Because I think that the world has probably transitioned on from that point. And there's numerous examples of that kind of the Attitude Era and how women were presented in that era. How have you seen women characters progress over time?
Well, if I go back to, I've been in almost every developmental system there's been, and I can remember years in systems where there were no women, and the women that were, lack of a better term, found or brought up were brought just to the TVs, and then the house shows at the time are now live events. The difference for me now is, and we'll fast forward to like the Angelina Loves on and forward from there, is these girls are athletes and they want to wrestle. Not only do they want to entertain, they want to wrestle. And we I say we, the company had gotten, wait a minute, we have this, these girls can go. These girls are good. Wait, this girl's a little diverse than this girl. And then you had the Alicia Foxes who are great athletes, you know, and you had the Bellas who wanted to do it. And you had Natty Neidhart, who comes from wrestling royalty. And then you add the Charlottes and the Baileys and the Sashas and the Paiges and the Emmas across the board. And these girls then set the tone for, no, we want to wrestle and we want to go 20 minutes. And Sasha and Bailey going Ironman matches, and Charlotte doing what she did in NXT and then going to main roster. And then, like I use the term stirring the pot, you're going to make the rest of the locker room, much like the men, either rise up or they got to move over. But the women that are in the system now, and before where you had one or two women, you have pretty close to 20 women in the Performance Center. And they're women from around the world now. And that's because of the Paiges and the Charlottes and the Emmas, you know, the girls there. And they take great pride in, we don't want to do a bra and panties match. To them, I'm not speaking for them. For me, you'd have to go back to a bra and panties match if every one of these girls retired and never came back to wrestling or sports entertainment. So it's come a long way. But then that's where a Trish and a Lita and a Molly Holly would fit in so much more now, I think, than the eras they were in, because those girls could go.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's really interesting. So did you see, with that talent that you had at your disposal, did you see the Divas Revolution coming? And was there like that specific pool of talent? Were you like, there is something happening here and it's going to change things?
It was a constant conversation of how are the girls doing? Hey, man, you have to take a look at this girl. Okay, we will. You have to, no matter what the old school mentality is, you have to look at them. And then I think that's what helped escalate NXT, was because the women's division at the time, let's go back 2 years ago, weren't getting the opportunities on the 2 and 3 hour shows. But in NXT, they were featured in three diva tags and all these other things, and they answered the bell. And they're the hardest working. I would put the women, when I was there, I would put the women in that locker room up against any men's locker room in the country.
And do you see them headlining Raw in the future?
I'd like to think that's going to happen again. I think it was a point in time and in history in the business when Lita and Trish did it. And then, AJ was very good. And I think the world of the Bellas, and I think if they're given the opportunity, they're going to run with it. I always say, and this is just Bill, the coach, always saying, run with it within the parameters, because they're changing the face of sports entertainment now. And the great thing about this generation, and the hard part, is telling them they don't have to do it all at once. So I want them to get those opportunities, and then I want them to take it step by step. So when they get it, they can keep it, instead of just being an every 3 or 4 years down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It's about it not being a novelty and maintaining that kind of level.
Yeah, and it's the same to me. But to me, it's the same for the guys as well.
Yeah, and that really shows how far women's wrestling has come. I guess that before it wouldn't have been in the same kind of breath as the guys. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But you're now actually, like, the organization seems to be treating them equally to an extent, because Max made some interesting comments about the Divas Revolution, in that yes, it was really positive for women's wrestling, but the situations, the stories they were brought into, as you've said a little while ago, they were such fantastic individuals. And when the Divas Revolution happened, they put them into 3 teams, and the 3 teams fought each other. And Max felt that may not have been very conducive to an improved women's wrestling, because you're restricted to the women's part of the show where they all fight each other.
Right.
And also he was quite critical of the term divas in terms of the fact that it should, like, a lot of people on the internet seem to be saying, a lot of wrestling fans, their forum is the internet, seem to be saying, like, why isn't it called the women's division? Is divas like structurally holding women's wrestling back now? And so do you agree with any of those points? Do you see the arguments there?
No, I see the arguments, because when you put 6 women of that talent, and I'm talking about Trinity, Sasha and Tamina against, Paige and Charlotte and Becky, and not taking away from the Bellas and Alicia, and you have all these factions. I think that's just wrestling, and sports entertainment or not, it still comes down to some wrestling, and there's still some old school thought. The problem for me is that everybody on the internet jumps on it, turns it into more than it has to be, which in turn, this generation lives on the internet. So once they read something about themselves or someone says it, now they believe that shit. And then they start to feel that way. So, and my thing is, you take, and that's why my show's called Face Value. You take everything that's said to you exactly the way it's said, and take the opportunity. That's my thing as a coach. You may not like the opportunity, but you're getting one. And these girls are the perfect example. While they may have to bite their tongues, scream into your pillow on the car ride. Tell someone you trust, but stay the hell off the internet and don't read the things they're saying about you. I feel like you should just be happy that people are talking about you. Don't buy into your own hype, and don't let the internet control your emotions so you say or do something that you'll regret and lose an opportunity. I agree with all of it, but I don't hang my hat on it.
It's really interesting. And just moving on from women's wrestling now, did you catch what Virgil was doing and Tommy Dreamer on the nightly show?
No.
Right. So they did a segment on racism in wrestling, and there was an interesting kind of element to it. But it, like, Virgil, I personally don't think Virgil came across very well or put over wrestling very well. But I think the kind of the point of the segment was interesting, because looking at like how black wrestlers have come through over time, there was a period where most of the time black wrestlers would be from a storyline background, wild, or from prison, like, was another common one. Whereas and again, that seems to be changing now. We spoke to JTG, who felt personally that there was a glass ceiling for black wrestlers. Is that something that you ever observed, or any glass ceilings for that matter? Have you ever felt that there were certain groups held back?
I think it goes back to your analogy of the movies. Go back to the early parts of the movies, and fortunately or unfortunately, those were the stereotypes, right? But then how can there be a glass ceiling when and I just use, and I'm not, to me, this is a conversation I try to stay away from. I've never been witness to anything like that. Booker T is the perfect example. And while there may be struggles in society, and that's why I say I try to stay away from that, I've been in this business for the better part of 28 years. And while I still go and do my seminars and my training camps, my message is the same. You go get it. You're not going to be held back because of race or because of height, which was a big thing. If you're not 6'2", 250 pounds, you're never going to get a job. Adrian Neville's not even close to either one of those things. And he's a WWE superstar. I've heard it. I've been around the conversations. I've heard Virgil with his rendition of how he thinks things were. I tend to stay away from it because, one, I'm a big fan of, you don't like the position you're in, get out. But if you feel like you're being held back, either speak up, do something about it, or move on to something where you can advance. And that may be a chicken shit answer, but it's the only honest one I have. I've never been a part of it. I'd rather say the opposite. Hey, at 6'2", 360 pounds, I felt like there was a glass ceiling for me. Is that a legitimate argument? Hell no, it's not a legitimate argument.
But if you can do a moonsault, you'll get by.
Right. And as long as you have something to offer, there's going to be opportunities.
Sure.
And I'm gonna stay with that one, and I've stayed that way, and I'm always gonna stay that way because I've never been part of it where I would finger point and go, and that's my thing with the internet. Unless you have proven facts and you can put it there and plead your case, it's just how you feel at the time. And I'm sure people feel like they've been held back. I'm not one of them. I've never had a speed bump put in front of me. I've had challenges in my career, and I've had opportunities to step up, and whether I did or not was on me. But you decide whether you want to keep going or not. But I've seen some of the stuff Virgil's doing, and I kind of tune out to it because I feel bad because I like him, and at the same time, I think, come on, man, what are you doing?
And it's interesting, and like there is an element for me as a British fan of when national identity comes into, and you were talking about stereotypes then, and I think that when you take nationality, that creates or has created in the past very specific stereotypes of a country. So for years, apart from the British Bulldog, William Regal was our hero in Britain, like, and you could see from the abnormal fan reactions when he came to the UK, where everyone's like cheering like mad for William Regal. But he was presented on TV as drinking tea with the picture of the Queen in the background.
Right.
And like you look at Sheamus, and he comes to the ring now, and his music video is like Irish landmarks or something, and like and then like similarly like Rusev when he was presented as a Russian with Putin on the screen and things like that. So I guess like I'm interested in why do you think that wrestling explores those very specific stereotypes when it comes to kind of nationality? And do you think it's because it's an American audience that is the focus with those kind of characters?
Well, I think I'll use Regal. If you did not portray that, would his welcome back in the UK be as big? No, it'd be, hey, we remember him when he was this with Robbie Brookside. Great, he moved on. He's a superstar. But because of that persona, same with Paige. If they said, Paige, really stay away from the accent and the kind of who you are, would her response be as big? You know, whereas Neville, who is English, right, but he gets over in a different way. Rusev, and I think it goes back to it. It really is entertainment now. So you got a Bulgarian Russian guy. You exploit the Russian thing for a certain Lana who speaks Russian and all that. You exploit it, but it's for entertainment. I think I'm just old school where if everybody just took it for what it was, it'd be great. Otherwise, Wade Barrett, would he get the ovations he gets going back if he was just?
I guess I guess my point is not about them playing up to being British or their nationality. Like the Swiss Superman, that is quite. It's not really saying anything about the Swiss people other than like Cesaro is an amazing physical specimen, and he happens to be Swiss. And like similarly, Wade Barrett is a king, which is where it comes in. But like Neville, there is no kind of, he is British, and all the British fans know he's British and will give him a huge ovation. But there is no sipping of the tea or the Queen being in the background, which I get Regal's character.
That's it. Regal can pull that off, and I think because he does it so well, he embraced it. Whereas if someone said, "Hey, let's do this," and if it didn't work, I think that's the changing of the guard now, is that the talent is coming up with their comfort zone and what works and what doesn't, you know?
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that, again, that Max said from our one that's launching next week is that he talked about how the stereotypes have changed. Like you've just said, it's the guys coming up with it now have kind of modernized the idea of their characters. So if you look at someone like Kevin Owens, Max's point was that he is like an old schoolyard bully, but he's intellectual and he's well spoken, and that's not a combination that you've really kind of seen before. Like did you know what I mean? So it's like, what characters in wrestling right now I don't know how much you watch wrestling or are a fan of wrestling like on a week-to-week basis, but what characters are you really enjoying at the moment?
I absolutely think that Bray Wyatt will be around for the next 100 years. I think we haven't seen the surface of Luke Harper. Guys like that, Ambrose. I think Ambrose is yet to see his highest level. And then I think you have guys like Rusev and those guys like that. To me, Bray Wyatt's the benchmark for creative, and that's all him. And he's off the set. He's one of the most intelligent kids. I say kid because I'm older. He's an intelligent man. He does his homework, and he's all in. And it's guys like Owens and Bray Wyatt and these guys that will look at The Miz. I think The Miz is brilliant. Is he ever going to be in the top 10 best wrestlers ever in the history of the world? No, but he's not a wrestler. He's a sports entertainer. The most seen media guy, the guy who knows his character and everything about him. And and then the flag bearer is Cena. So Bray Wyatt for me is the benchmark for the guys coming in. How can you get in the ring with a character like Bray Wyatt and be relevant?
And the thing about Bray Wyatt as well is something that I've picked up watching it, is that his promos on a week-to-week basis are amazing. Like that he's maybe, like, in my opinion as a fan, like an uneducated, like never involved in any way. He, to me, is one of the best, if not the best standard of promo on a week-to-week, in a show-to-show basis, because they often have him finishing SmackDown.
I couldn't agree more. I'm on the same page.
Who do you think? Are there any characters that you look at the moment and you think they're not working, or are there any ones that you're unhappy with in kind of the way that they're being presented, or anything like that you feel is the opposite of kind of Bray Wyatt, if you get what I mean?
No, I
didn't answer that question very well, but you get my.
No, I understood what you and I think because of knowing the present talent. Sometimes I'll sit back, but I always preach this message to the talent is, if you watch a show to criticize it, you're not getting anything out of it. And I try to keep that, because I am a fan, and I do watch as much as I can. Naturally, I don't watch as much as I used to, being busy and everything else, but I stay in touch and I follow it, and I choose to watch it, and then I like to guess myself through it. I don't think there's been a time where I went, I think they're absolutely killing this guy or this girl, or it's totally the wrong thing. If anything, they make me watch again next week, and I want to see where it comes, where it ends up. And then sometimes you go, okay, maybe that's not it. The one that comes to mind maybe is Bo Dallas. And I think it's just timing and everything else, and what you're going to put into it. And that my message to all the talent is, you have to stay relevant. You have to keep coming up with ideas, and don't wait for other people to do it for you, because when you wait for someone else to totally take control of your future or your storylines, then you have nothing to say. So I think the long version of answering your question is, I don't look at it that way. And I hope I never do look at it and go, oh, they're burying him, or that didn't work out. I look at it and go, okay, let me watch it some more and see if I can get where they're going. Sure.
Yeah, I totally get that, and it's interesting how like people like Bo Dallas and Adam Rose is another one that comes to my mind. NXT, they're storming it, and the fans are behind them 100%. And then there's something that changes in the main roster environment, and that doesn't happen to that many that have come through the NXT system. But why do you think it is, without being specific about individuals? But why do you think it is that there's a change? Is it the fans? Is it the arenas? Is it the vibe? What is it that is connecting with one setting but not another?
I think that all comes into play. I think it's the fans. I think it's the setting. I think it's the mentally thinking of the bigger picture. I put it to the same as you have a college standout in football, and everybody picks this guy to be the best quarterback or the best running back or linebacker. And then far and few between, they get to the NFL and they don't make it. It's not for everyone. NXT sets the bar so high that you have to be prepared to carry that with you. But I'll use, to me, here's the perfect example. Blue Pants, who comes from nowhere, and it's not a shot at her as a person. She comes out of the blue. The fans at NXT are chanting Blue Pants everywhere she goes. But if you brought her up to the main roster, it doesn't mean she's going to be successful. She may have a split second of notoriety, but to me, that's what separates the stars and the locker room. So I put this same analogy as it is with football. You have a great athlete, their whole college career, they get to the NFL and they do okay. And they last a couple years and then, they have to move on. I think that's the same scenario. I don't think it's them as a person who fails or necessarily creative that fails. It's just one of those things. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't. The good news for NXT, in my opinion, is 95% of the time it's clicking and they're off and running.
And when you were kind of going through that development and stuff like that, were there any other gimmicks throughout your career? Were there any other gimmicks that were pitched to you that you were like, there is no way I'm doing that?
Every gimmick that was given to me, and I've actually only had, I was Crash, and I was Hugh Morris, and then I had that huge erection thing there for a little bit, and then I went Bill DeMott. So all of those things I ran with. The one that I questioned was the Misfits in action, and that was the general erection. And believe it or not, I wasn't going to make any merchandise because nobody's going to sell huge erection dolls. But that set me up to be successful, and then turn that back into Hugh Morris, and then into Bill DeMott towards the end of WCW. So there's nothing I turned down. Looking back on, I go, oh man, if I would have done this with it, maybe I could have gone farther with it. But I think that happens as you have experience. But there's nothing I turned down. I don't think there was ever a time when I said I wouldn't do that. I probably was one of those guys who said, what else do you want me to do? But that was the vibe of that time anyway, was what else can we do?
Yeah, and I just want to kind of touch on to politics a little bit now. A really interesting thing that happened a couple of years ago was with Jon Stewart on The Daily Show said, and it was really, really eye-opening, I think. He said the most articulate kind of discussion going on in America about the Tea Party is on wrestling commentary during Jack Swagger matches. And
Yeah.
I found that really incredible that out of all the kind of media in America, it was wrestling commentary that was having the most articulate, balanced discussion on immigration and the Tea Party in America. Right. So that's an example of wrestling dealing with politics really well and hitting a very topical thing. But then if you look at kind of stuff like Mex America, and you look at the times where they have Obama versus Clinton or do things like that, how do you think that wrestling in general deals with the world of politics, or presents the world of politics?
I think for the most part, everybody tries to stay neutral. Then you have your Putin things and your because he's relevant, and I think that's what the shows are now, is they're relevant. And then when you have someone like JBL, who's on Fox and all these other things, who's probably one of the most intelligent wrestlers you'll ever meet, and who can tell those stories and carry it over. But Zeb, everybody's very intellectual, and they know what's going on, and then they just put that entertaining spin on it. I think they keep it relevant. And here's the thing, in social media and the things today, that the wrestling purist may not like that segment, but you just opened the door for how many thousands of others who would never have thought that. And then look at Jon Stewart now, what he did in wrestling, just recently. So you call him what you want, but to me, Vince is a genius. And it's the same with Paul Heyman. You give him the soapbox, and he'll take politics, turn it into wrestling so fast, and you'll forget about everything else, and you're back to Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. And that's really what it's about, is telling that story, grabbing a newer audience and bringing them in. And then you have guys like what is he called now? Oh my gosh, forgive me. But the guy who's formerly Brodus Clay.
George Murdoch, is it Tyrus? Yeah.
Yeah. So Tyrus is on a weekend show, and he's talking about politics and world news, and JBL is doing it, and John Cena every other week is on the Today Show and all these things. So they're reaching such a broad. I think that's what it's really all about. You have to reach more than just the wrestling fan, because I feel like we have the wrestling fan.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot then. A lot of things that have come up within this discussion have been about stereotypes and using stereotypes. What are the positives, do you think, of this wrestling world being presented through stereotypes like that?
If you have there's no one or nothing that cannot be successful. Whether it's, I think Eugene was a great character and would be so much more relevant now. I think, I don't know, politically correctness maybe a factor, but you take these characters and a guy who really stutters, and bring him on TV, people will get with that because that's who he is. And I think what's happening in wrestling is, if it's real, that's what they want, and they want to be entertained. And I think that's what's changed is, I think we've tried to become characters for so long, and now these cats are really the characters. There has to be something to Barrett for him to be that way. And it goes back to the Regals and all those things too. But it goes back to Paul and Stephanie when they're out there talking. There's that thing, and you hate it, but it's that thing, and it's stereotypical authority. It's stereotypical, but it's true, because everybody who watches it knows someone like that or has to deal with it. The thing that I want people to remember is that at the end of that show, they're going on to another town and doing it, and they're going on, and in between it's the Make-A-Wish, and it's all these things, and it's back to training, and it's back to honing that craft. So people can be pissed off, or people can be intrigued, or people can be, and Zeb's not riding a chair because he's making fun of someone who can't walk. The guy can't walk. So you keep him relevant. And why it was so important when John Laurinaitis did it was because he was mocking it and making, taking easy way, and it draws people in. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my mind it makes sense.
Yeah, sure. And so when you were first starting out, how did you get into wrestling?
I got into wrestling I was told I couldn't do it. My dad brought me into Brooklyn. I had finished playing football, and he just didn't want me sitting around the house. I met Johnny Rods in Brooklyn and told me it wasn't for me, but I could watch. I took that as a challenge. I got beat up every day by Taz. Back then, Taz was in there before me, and then in turn, I beat up on Dreamer and Devon, and they beat up on someone after them, and I always say I was fortunate. I was always in the right place at the right time, and I'm very grateful for my career. The good, the bad, the conversations, whether they were in my favor or not. I'm grateful for the wrestling aspect and the business aspect. How people perceive me, I can't change. Except now on the Bill DeMott Experience and these podcasts and things like this. But this is the guy you get all the time. And I got into it because I fell in love with an opportunity. I was just a casual fan. I had an opportunity to do something. And I've been around the world dozens of times, and I've met the most famous people. I've met some of the greatest people I'll ever meet, from kids to old folks to people I never would have ran into outside of New Jersey in my life. So just the right place at the right time, man.
Yeah, and the being such a big part of NXT and the development of where kind of wrestling has got to now, is there a part of you that that wants to go back to that, and if given the opportunity would go back to be part of that again?
Sure. I think I'm not the guy who says I have one more match in me. I don't think I'd ever be that guy. I don't think I'd turn down someone going, hey, we got the gimmick battle royal. Would you want to do it? Yes, because it'd be fun. One of those things. But I'm not the guy who says I have another run in me. But I am the guy who I love to be in the ring. I love to be around young talent. I love to be around talent that's looking for another way to fix things or try things. And I love training. I absolutely love wrestling. And I take advantage of every opportunity, from seminars to tryout camps and things like that. And if the opportunity ever comes up again, you never say you're not going to do it, because I'd be a liar. But if it ever came up, it'd be a serious conversation with my wife.
Yeah. So in terms of what's happening now, I just want to relate a kind of a topical thing. It probably won't be topical when my version of this goes out.
Okay.
But Rollins' injury is 9 months, 6 to 9 month injury. And
right.
In terms of what impact does something like that have on the kind of the roster that's working around them? And it's happened with multiple talents in NXT as well, Itami and Zayn and stuff. What impact does an injury have on a wrestler's kind of development, but also the people around them, and what kind of what opportunities does it create at the same time?
I think the first thing that when someone gets hurt as a competitor and athlete, I'm thinking, how do I get there? I'm thinking, what do I have to do to take that spot? And that's the message, that don't wait till the top guy goes down and then have something. Have 16 things in your pocket. Be ready to answer any conversation or, hey, any character thing that comes up. And I think that's what's happening now, is that there's going to be somebody stepping up. The beauty part for Rollins, in my opinion, is he's so strong as a character. Whereas 20 years ago, if you were out for 9 months, you're forgotten about. The minute he's up and walking and doing things, he's back in backstage interviews and doing all kinds of things. So that's a tribute to him as a character of how strong he is. But to these other guys, I'm thinking, when someone goes down with an injury, instead of sitting there going, well, if they call on me, I'll be ready, I should have been on their mind 3 weeks before someone got hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Everything's an opportunity. And if everybody in NXT, when Sami Zayn went down, when he got hurt on Raw, there should have been 6 guys, in my opinion, going, I can make that shot. Whatever his shots were, I can make them. I can do it. But you have to be able to do it. Because everybody goes, oh, if I was given the chance, yes, but when you're given the chance, can you answer the bell? And that's the whole thing is opportunity. So it's unfortunate. The with a little bit of humor in this, the upside to him being injured is he gets a little bit of a break, because he's been running strong for so long now, and nobody wants that break, but he gets a little bit of a break. But I guarantee you see Rollins in the next couple weeks back on TV in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
And with kind of Cena off and Orton off and people like that, who would you pick as the person who takes his spot, or the person who becomes champion? Who would it be in your eyes?
Ambrose. Ambrose is, and to me, if I had my roster picked, Ambrose, finding a way, beating my head every night, trying to make sure it's in the right way, keeping Roman Reigns going in that direction. Bray Wyatt's there, Luke Harper's there, the girls. There's so many. Rusev, I know he's battling an injury, but he's a guy that you would get going. And then you look at the tag team division, and I think Goldust is making his way back. There's so much going on that it's not an easy fix, but they're there. And that's the beauty of it. Everybody goes, oh, they don't make enough stars. But look what happens when the stars go down. Other stars step up.
Yeah. And do you think, you mentioned a minute ago about Rollins and the having a break thing. Do you think that there's how Raw is 3 hours and this is also a SmackDown and a main event, and they're touring every night? Do you think that there's I don't want to sound like negative. When I spoke about this to Jeff Jarrett, and he said it was the most negative question he's ever heard. So I'm trying to present it in a different way.
No, go ahead. Present it the same way.
What do you think that there's too much wrestling? I guess is my question. Do you think that they wrestle too much? Do you think there's too much overexposure? Do you think that people are pushing the wrestlers too hard out there, or is there an element of less is more, is what I'm saying?
No, I don't think so. I don't know, maybe, but I think to the same point of what we talked about earlier, that the wrestlers have so much say in it. They can pick their schedule. It just depends on what you want to accomplish. For those chosen ones that this is what they do, there's there's no way. I don't think there's any way to be overexposed. I think because the other side is, okay, well, let's take you off of some of that. And then the mental games start, and then you start overthinking what you just said and what you did. Listen, this is unlike anything else. There's no season to this. Every other professional athlete has a season. And sports entertainers run, and they run hard. And in a perfect world, and when the wrestling gods line up, you run hard for the next 20 years. Those careers are over. The 20-year careers are over. Yeah. But if you can run strong like Cena for 10 years and do these things and do them the right way and set your future up, no, there's no such thing. Here's my honest answer. For people who feel like they've been overexposed or they're working too hard, go do something else.
Yeah, sure. And I guess where that kind of question comes from is in two parts. One is that when I explain to people, because a lot of my friends don't watch wrestling like I watch wrestling, right? So, and to explain to them wrestling is kind of when you say to them, they actually wrestle every night. Yes, they're on TV like a couple of nights, but they do shows in different cities every night.
Right.
And so it seems to me like it's quite a physical toll, like that may put performers at more risk of injuries than others. But then on the other hand, I look at people like that, characters that I think people are a bit bored of. Like, for example, sometimes I think if Randy Orton went away for a month or so and then came back and everybody was cheering because he's Royal Rumble as a surprise or something, sometimes that's, I guess, where that comes from. It's not intended to be, is there too much wrestling? It's more about how can characters be used in a way in which can reinvigorate the excitement that maybe they once had.
Yeah, I see that. But I think you have that in your Lesnars, your Takers, your Kanes, when they bring guys back. But look at how many years Randy Orton had to work at his craft to get to that point where he could have a month or so. John Cena, these guys. So you want that. It's like anything else. You want to work your way up from an intern at IBM to get to the top office to be able to go on a month's vacation. So when you come back, you're the new guy in the stock market or whatever else, and you're the brainchild again. And that goes for everybody. Everybody needs a break. And from my experience, everybody has the opportunity to go in and go, I need some time off, or I need a break, or can I have this weekend? And the answer is never no. But old school mentality is, well, if I take those 3 days off because I want to go to the beach, who's going to step in on my 3 days off? Yeah. But I think when you've earned a spot where you're Randy Orton and Cena and guys like that, absolutely take a month off, because when you come back, it's reinvigorating the business as well.
And what's your opinion on the Daniel Bryan situation? Do you think are we going to see Daniel Bryan again? Because I really hope we are.
I hope we see him. He's a tremendous competitor. He's a great athlete. I think he's gotten so much better in the past couple of years with his delivery when he does promos and things like that. His character is real because it's him, just dialed up. If he's injured the way people are saying, I really hope he does the right thing for himself and his wife and his future, and finds a different path in the business. But I think we can see him. If he's not hurt and he can go and he knows that with full, clear conscience, I think you'll see him. But he's got a lot to offer the business still. And there's guys, to me, Taz was the stepping stone for that. In the ring, out of the ring, branch out into other things. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. But I think Daniel Bryan's his future is still in sports entertainment. I'm just not sure if it's in the ring.
And it seems to me that the WWE particularly are quite good at finding other opportunities where there are some, like Corey Graves is another example.
Yeah, perfect example. That's why, you can believe everything you read and, all these things. But if you look at it, if you really cut down to the bare bones of it, there's opportunities for people and there's other things. And the beauty part now, when we go back to the NXT and the kids that are coming in now, they're being groomed for more than just being big sweaty guys or sweaty girls, you know what I mean, or things like that. They're getting to know the business inside and out. So at the end of the day, they can have a career that lasts longer than what they did in the ring.
And just one more really is the Global Force Wrestling thing that Jeff Jarrett's doing. He used to be taking a new approach with kind of stadium sizes, and the six-sided ring is back, and who knows how that will be presented on TV. But what do you think of kind of the development of a new wrestling company? And like, I guess it's back to that thing with NXT now in the landscape, and with TNA that's seemingly on a downward slide. Right. Do you think that Global Force Wrestling can come into this industry and be successful?
If there's someone to do it, it's Jeff. I think competition is good. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the format. I haven't been to any shows yet, but I've talked to some of the guys and girls that are working with Jeff. I know Jeff. I know that his mind is good for that. I would like to see it be successful, because then it's just more opportunities for wrestling. To me, that's what it really comes down to, is wrestling. If you can get out there and wrestle, and if they can keep filling the houses like they did in Vegas and doing those things, and I know they were overseas and they were by you, and I talked to Nick Aldis, who I think the world of, and I think he's got so much potential, and he's the future of the business as well.
He was on Gladiators over here.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a tremendous guy who's more than just a wrestler, right? So Nick has gotten very business oriented being with Jeff, and I'd like to see them take off. Is it going to, or is it going to turn into a Lucha Underground where it's just a TV show? Who knows? But as long as there's wrestling out there and someone can make their bones with someone to get an opportunity, I always think that's a good thing. And as long as, listen, it comes down to, it could be 500 companies again, or it could be one. But if you're not happy doing it, no company is going to make you happy.
That's all my questions, Bill. Thanks very much for your time.
Hey, man, this has been great. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, just keep me in touch, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we have this really great illustrator called Paul Cooper, who does like an illustration of our interviewees. So I'll send you that as well when it comes out.
Yeah,
and
please do.
And you can see yourself in cartoon form.
Oh, I'm in cartoon form every day. Hey, this has been Dan Higgins, and let me plug your website again. It's www.puremovies.co.uk.
Yeah, and also, if I can just add, the site which launches next week will be at where this interview will be hosted on. It will be on puremovies.co.uk. It will also be on the worldaccordingtowrestling.com.
Awesome. Worldaccordingtowrestling.com. Dan, I can't thank you enough. It's been a great conversation. I really do appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks very much, Bill.
Thanks, Dan. All right. This is great. I got interviewed on my own podcast, and I loved it. We got to talk a little wrestling that I don't do a lot of lately, but I enjoyed it. Hey, I'm Bill DeMott. This is the Bill DeMott Experience. Do what you say what you mean what you do. I'm out.
Visit VinceRussoBrand.com to sign up for exclusive VIP content. For just $4.95 a month, you get over 20 new video shows monthly, including Vixens Who Rule, The Swerve, and Shoot to Thrill, where Vince Russo interviews stars in wrestling and beyond. Listen to Vince and Jeff Lane discuss weekly news and rumors, and review current and Attitude Era Raws. Also, watch the cult hit Bucket Full of Chicken next. Go to VinceRussoBrand.com and click the red subscribe button to join now.